Today's topic is top 5 strategies to improve your brain health now. And I had initially put this out there as top 5 tips. So I kind of did a bait and switch on you because I wanted it to be like easy, 5 tips, right? But I'm never going to like make things so simple and watered down where it's not useful to you. I'm going to actually give you 5 broad categories. And within each of those broad categories or strategies, I'm going to give you some things you can do, multiple tips. And your job today is to listen actively and to write down things that are of interest to you. So hopefully you have pen and paper or something to type onto. And by the end of today, I'd love for you to tell me what you're going to work on in the next week, in the next month. And hopefully we'll see you at next month's program. And so I want this to be an active process for you. It's not enough to come and just learn information. We have to implement it for it to actually matter. And I put the word now in all capitals, and I do mean now, because the things we do today impact our brain today. It's all very dynamic. It's not like you need to wait weeks and years before something that your exercise regimen today gets to manifest itself, right? So know that what you do today matters, and the little decisions you make every day have a big impact on your overall health. All right, so we're going to discuss why you can have brain loss, even if you have stable MS, stable autoimmune disease. We're going to talk about 5 key strategies to support your brain, and we're going to talk to you about what you can do to get started. And so here are the 5 strategies. We're going to talk about hormesis, which is a way of stressing your body. It's not the kind of stress you're probably thinking. I'm going to build on that for you. We're going to talk about the concept of oxidative damage and free radicals. Really important to know what's happening at the cellular level so that you can have a picture of what you're impacting when you do all that good work that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about an anti-inflammatory lifestyle and neuroprotective tools, some of which may actually be neuroregenerative, right? Like building new neurons and new connections between neurons. And finally, we're going to talk about how to tend to the mind and body. So in a normal aging brain, there are things that happen. If you look at the brain of a person in their 80s or 90s, there's going to be some volume loss. Blood flow is not as robust. There's less connectivity between neurons. And so the connections are not as robust, but they can still happen. But the connectivity is less effective. And neurotransmitters decline, things like dopamine and noradrenaline. We just don't make enough as we age, and that actually impacts overall brain health. And that's all part of normal aging. So how does this experience? In normal aging, people will experience changes in memory. They may notice that their attention span is shortened, or they just have more difficulty paying attention. Their brain starts working a little slower. They're not as quick and sharp as they used to be. They can't multitask. They might have difficulty finding the right word. All of this sort of falls in the realm of normal aging. We wouldn't get super alarmed if somebody at a certain age came in and described some of these symptoms. Okay, so let's talk about neurodegeneration. This doesn't happen just in MS. It can happen in lots of different conditions, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, etc. And what makes this different than normal brain aging is that it happens at a faster rate. And people might become aware of the symptoms more quickly, whereas with normal aging, it happens so slowly. Sometimes it kind of takes a while for it to catch up with you. And you may lose functions beyond what we would expect with normal aging. So you can have rapid changes in memory, and there isn't only one type of memory. There's different types of memory. And so a neurologist can dig into that deeper to figure out, well, what is actually the change in memory? What's actually happening? Difficulty communicating, whether it's with finding words or being able to organize speech. There may actually be behaviors that fall outside of social norms. So age is actually the #1 risk for neurodegenerative diseases. Like if you think about Alzheimer's, it typically happens to people that are much older. So age is the number one risk factor. But if we were to personalize this to our group, MS is another risk factor. It is a neurodegenerative condition. And unfortunately, whether the neurodegeneration is due to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, there really are no drugs or supplements that can prevent or stop dementia and that, cognitive decline. We just don't have those. There are some medications that can actually slow down the progression of some dementias in the mild to moderate phase, but not when it's more advanced. But they just slow it down. They don't prevent it and they don't reverse it. So let's talk about MS and the neurodegeneration that happens. As we get older, we may shift from a pattern of having a lot of neuroinflammation to a more neurodegenerative pattern. And on MRI, there might be more atrophy that can be visualized and disability starts to progress, right? So you might go from having lots of relapses to now kind of having a more steady decline. And something that is really interesting is right around menopause, when there's a steep drop in estrogen, you can actually have more disability. And so we sometimes use the EDSS as an objective way of quantifying disability, and we can see a progression of the EDSS score. Now, I don't want to leave out the men in our group. Testosterone also plays a role. Testosterone is an immune modulator. It actually fine-tunes the immune system. And so whenever I have a man who is a patient of mine who may come in with an autoimmune disease, an inflammatory disease, cardiovascular disease, they have a heart attack, especially at like a younger age, I always would check their testosterone system to make sure that the testosterone is not low. All right, so you may have heard of smoldering MS, and the person that I keep hearing it from is Dr. Giovannoni, who's also known as Professor G on social media. And he's really, and his colleagues have brought this issue to light. And this is a wonderful paper if you want to grab it and read it, because I think this is something we really need to start paying attention to. I myself, as someone who has relatively stable MS, I worry about this because you can have this process in the background happening even if you're not having a lot of relapses. And if you think about what smoldering is like when a fire burns out and there's no more flames, but there's smoke. This is sort of that. It's happening in the background. It's not really obvious until it's been happening for a long time. And they go on to state that this progressive accumulation of disability in MS can happen independent of relapse activity, right? So there's two things happening. You can have relapses, and then you can have this smoldering MS in the background that over time contributes to neurodegeneration and progression of disability. And we need to start thinking about what we can do beyond DMTs, or, we need to start coming up with therapies that actually address this. We don't really have robust pharmaceuticals to address this problem. However, there are lifestyle habits that can set you up for success, and we will be talking about some of that. Okay, so what are some risk factors that set you up for declining brain health, right? Where things happen at a faster rate. High blood sugars, whether it's prediabetes or diabetes, and if it's not controlled. Overweight. If you have excess weight on you, you're going to have more inflammation happening. Many people with history of concussions, head injuries, will have a higher risk of neurodegeneration, as do people with infections, especially if they're chronic, like sinusitis, maybe, bowel infections, candida infections. We talked about loss of sex hormones as it happens with men and women as we age. Think about toxic exposures. You're getting exposed to high doses of BPA, mercury, heavy metals. These things can be damaging to the brain. Also, lifestyle habits like being sedentary, not getting good sleep, not addressing sleep apnea, not treating it with CPAP to make sure you're oxygenating at night, chronic stress. All of these things are your environment, and they set you up for worse brain outcomes as you age. So when these things on the left happen, they lead to imbalances at the cellular level. So you might have more inflammation. You might have more of this oxidative stress that I'm going to go into in a little bit, where it's just stress, molecular stress at the cellular level. Your gut microbiome can go out of balance. Here's one: endocrine disruption. Hormones can get disrupted, and this can manifest in many different ways. And then mitochondria can act up. So mitochondria are the parts of your cell that produce energy, and they can actually fail when they don't have the right environment. And if you don't produce enough ATP molecules, you won't get the energy that you need to fuel your body. Okay. So I want to talk to you about the biggest risk factor of all. Think about what that might be. It's not on my last slide. I'll give you a clue. This guy, okay? Denial is the biggest risk factor of all. When we ignore this, it doesn't help us. It is uncomfortable to think about the idea that, hey, my MS symptoms are relatively well controlled, but I can still get neurodegeneration and brain atrophy and increased disability, especially in my later years. Maybe it's actually easier to do what this guy is doing, right? But is that really our mindset? Is that what we really want out of our health, out of our life? And so I think it's important that we acknowledge this problem. That's the first step. Like, let's just acknowledge that it happens. And let's think about how we think about this problem. What's our mindset around it? Are we going to go for doom and gloom? Or are we going to have a growth mindset and think about what's possible and how we can get into the driver's seat of our health, right? So what's our mindset? I want you to think about these. This might actually be the most important slide of all. What's your end goal? If it's truly your goal to age well and to have MS stay as quiet as possible, are you doing the things that are going to get you there? And once you kind of figure out what your goal is, you got to find your root causes. In integrative and functional medicine, we talk a lot about root cause. What is driving this autoimmune process? In Western medicine, we care a lot about symptom management and getting you comfortable and quieting down your symptoms with pharmaceuticals. But we're not always going upstream to think about what are the root causes? What is driving this? Is this person chronically stressed? Is this person unsupported socially? Is there a nutrition problem, right? Sometimes when we can address the root cause, we make a lot more progress faster. And then I want you to map out your path. We each have a different path to getting to our end goal. There's no one size fits all approach. I never dictate to my patients that this is what you must do. This is the diet you must have, because it doesn't work that way. We're all different and we're all going to do it differently. My job is to give you lots of options, lots of strategies for implementation. And then you've got to get in the driver's seat and figure out how you're going to do it. And then we're here to support each other through it. So my goal for you is to spring into action today. Like, what one small thing can you do today based on our discussion to start creating a better environment for your brain health? So our brain is always regenerating and degenerating, but when we're in our younger years, we are much more regenerative than degenerative, right? And so there's always this ongoing two processes at the same time. And the question is, which one's happening more? I want you to focus on how you can drop degeneration and support regeneration. And so our approach is going to include many things that I'm about to jump into here. So here is a really kind of fun paper, which actually, it's not MS, it's Alzheimer's, but I think it demonstrates something really nicely. What they did was they looked at 5 different healthy lifestyle habits. It was diet, exercise, keeping your brain active, not drinking heavily, and not smoking. Okay. They could drink light or moderate levels, but not heavy. And what they found from these 2 different studies when they pulled the data was that people who did 4 out of 5 of those things had a 60% lower risk of getting Alzheimer's dementia compared to people who had were doing just 0 or 1. So 2 of them are sort of easier than some of the other ones, don't smoke, don't drink. If those are things that are a part of your life, just cutting those 2 out set you up for success. Okay. So I want you to think about what lifestyle factors can you modify to improve your brain health. So maybe you're taking notes right now. Write that down somewhere. Put it in the chat. So here are the 5 strategies we're going to dig into. Let's talk about stressing your body. I'm not talking about emotional stress where you get anxious. I'm talking about hormesis. Hormesis is a fascinating thing that happens at the cellular level, and our body systems need it to stay awake and active and ready to do what they need to do. And I love this picture of this bird balancing itself between these 2 different branches with its skinny little legs. Can you imagine what's happening in the legs right now? They're probably shaking, right? It's stressing its legs out right now. But that's a good thing because those muscles are building and there's connections going up to the brain, right? And he's not going to hold this position forever, right? So hormesis is a low-level stress that helps keep our body systems on and ready to act. These body systems could be the mitochondria, hormones, the gut, different cellular systems, antioxidant systems. So what's special about hormesis is it's not long-term stress. It's intermittent, like exercise. You exercise for a little bit, and then you stop, right? It doesn't go on forever. And what happens when you have a hormetic stress is that you turn on the stress response genes, right? Hormesis is a signal from your environment that tells certain genes to turn on. And these genes are involved in turning on antioxidants, turning on inflammation, but for a short period, right? Because that stress is going to go away. Autophagy, which is this process of eating up older, more dysfunctional cells to make room for healthier cells to come into circulation, and also DNA repair. So all of these are good things that you would want to turn on for a short period of time. So how can you turn on hormesis? Here's some tips coming at you. So I want you to think about if you can do some of these things. Heat exposure, like, going into a sauna, right? Maybe that's not an option for many of us who are heat sensitive, but you turn on your heat shock proteins when you have a limited exposure to heat. Same with cold. There's a lot of talk about deliberate cold exposure and all of the good things that it does. So it is a short-term stress to the body. And as a result, you turn on many systems. And for anyone who actually does this, you might actually recognize that you feel good after one of these stresses. And so this summer I was traveling in Canada, and there was a glacial river near Banff National Park in Canada. And I was like, I got to try this. I dunked myself in for less than a minute. It was really mind over matter. But for the next 3 to 4 hours, I was like walking on clouds. I was happy. I was calm. My body felt good. And so that was an example of what hormesis can do with cold exposure. Now, you don't have to go jump into a glacial river. There's some studies that say if you can get your temperature in your home or your workspace 62 degrees, that can actually help with hormesis. It can also save you money because you're not overheating your home. By the way, best temperature for sleep is like 60 to 64 degrees. So if you're putting it at 68, it's one thing maybe that's not helping you sleep. So colder temperatures can be really helpful for our physiology. Fasting is another way to turn on hormesis. When you're constantly loading up on calories, you're actually not helping out your mitochondria and your hormone systems and your gut microbiome and your gut health. Having periods of time where you go without loading up your GI tract is actually another kind of hormetic stress. Now, you may or may not restrict calories, but a lot of people will do overnight fasting, where it's a fast between dinner and breakfast. If you can get to slowly get yourself to maybe 14 to 16 hours, that's a pretty good hormetic stress. And people love fasting. I talk about fasting in other places. I want always people to be careful, even with short fasts, especially if there's blood sugar issues. So be careful. We don't want to, all of a sudden have bad outcomes. Same with cold exposure. If you're going to do that cold shot in your shower, if you're a person with unstable blood pressure or your, vascular system is not super robust, you have heart problems, don't do that. The last thing I want is for you to pass out, hit your head, right? So here's another hormetic stress: exercise. You stress your body for a short period of time. You may even damage some muscles, which will all get repaired post-exercise when the other genes kick in. So here are 3 ways you can turn on hormesis to stress your body systems. And one cool thing about exercise that I want to kind of highlight to you what happens at the cellular level is interleukins. These are sort of communication molecules of the immune system. IL-6 is actually inflammatory. During exercise, IL-6 goes up, but as a result, IL-10 goes up, and IL-10 is anti-inflammatory. So this is just one way that exercise dials down inflammation. Exercise also makes your mitochondria work better. It's a stress to your mitochondria because all of a sudden you're doing this extra activity where your body needs more energy. So the mitochondria go, oh no, we have to make more ATP molecules. So not only do they recalibrate how they're doing this work, but there's actually all of these fusion reactions that happen between different mitochondria. So exercise helps facilitate that. And if you are a person that struggles with fatigue, anxiety, depression, chronic pain, getting your mitochondria to work better is actually a really important strategy. So exercise can help get your mitochondria work better. So what's and while we're on the topic of exercise, what is the best exercise for brain health? And you might have some ideas about this, but I will say it is the exercise you will actually do. Okay. I don't care what the studies show. If you're not up for doing that exercise, it's going to do you no good. Okay. So think about what feels good to you, what you would look forward to, and that's what you do. But let me show you some of the data. HIIT, high intensity interval training, is magic. This is where you might do short sprints, or if you're on a bike, you pedal real fast. You're working at your maximal effort for a short period of time, usually not more than a minute. You're getting into anaerobic activity. You're using up all the oxygen, right? And now you have to flip over into anaerobic metabolism. When you do high intensity interval training, BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, increases. And this is my favorite way to exercise. And every time I exercise, I imagine a halo around my head of BDNF just protecting my brain, creating more neurons, creating more connections between neurons, repair happening. HIIT has been shown to improve cognitive effect, motor activity, your ability to move, and it helps people maintain their fitness. There is some data that HIIT can be safe for people with some disability due to MS, but this is something where you would have to work up to, maybe with a therapist, a physical therapist, a trainer. You'd want to be careful. This is not within the realm of possibilities for many of us with MS. If our ability to walk, for example, has been affected, or our ability to use our legs. So if this is not a level of intensity that you can get into, don't worry, I got other things for you. You could do VILPA, okay? Vigorous intensity lifestyle physical activity. That's what it stands for. And this is for people who are too busy to exercise. I know that excuse really well, actually. I'm actually very good at using excuses, but I also know how to catch myself and go, okay, that's an excuse. So you're working to close to your 80% of your maximum heart rate, but you're only doing it for 1 to 3 minutes. And you're doing this maybe 3 times a day. So throughout your workday, you can all of a sudden get down and do some push-ups, hold a plank, go up some stairs, like do something that's challenging, go upstairs with your kid or your groceries. So you don't have to do it for 20 or 30 minutes. It's for 1 to 3 minutes, 3 times a day. And this has been shown. I didn't see any research or data on this for MS. It's kind of a new thing, but this study showed 2 to 3 bouts a day for 3 to 4 minutes, showed lower all-cause cardiovascular and cancer mortality. So this is good for the brain also. So if this fits within your lifestyle better, then just do this. But please do something, right? Not exercising is not an option. And then resistance training is also important. And for some of us that have more limited mobility, we can do maybe resistance training with our upper extremities or lower extremities. This could be as simple as even resistance bands or very light weights. And resistance training increases neuroplasticity. This is your brain's ability to make new connections and to adapt to new environments. And then how much exercise do you need? These are recommendations from the Center for Disease Control and the CDC, and I've linked this below. 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise. This is for healthy adults. So if you have physical limitations, you're going to adapt this to what works for you. Moderate intensity, yes, you can do math to figure out if you're in the moderate intensity range, but who wants to do math when they're exercising? This is how you can gauge it. You can talk, you can carry a conversation, but you can't sing a song. And your other option, if you can't get into moderate, if you want to do high intensity, is to do 75 minutes a week of high intensity where you can't talk or sing. You don't have to do both. You do one or the other or some combination thereof. And if you can't do moderate intensity, that's okay too, but make sure you're getting in at least 150 minutes of low intensity, if not more. You're also supposed to work out all major muscle groups twice a week. These are the CDC recommendations for healthy adults. So it's always important to tailor your exercise program to your ability. There are adaptive exercises that physical therapists can help with. Physical therapy is well covered by insurance. Don't forget to ask your doctor for a referral to physical therapy because they can help you learn how to exercise in a way that's within your ability, and they can help you, progress as time goes by, as you become more fit. So let's talk about our second broad category, oxidative damage. So all of our cells actually experience stress from all kinds of molecules bouncing around that can be damaging. So you can think about this balance between free radicals right here. These are dangerous molecules. They're unstable molecules. They like to go and bounce around and damage things like protein, DNA, cell membranes. And we have a system called our antioxidant system that helps neutralize these free radicals. So these antioxidants are going to counter the bad effects of the free radicals. You can get antioxidants from eating plants. You can also make your own antioxidants like glutathione from different amino acids from protein. So this is why antioxidants are so important, and their job is to just make sure that we have this scenario here where there's way more antioxidants than free radicals so that we don't have a lot of oxidative damage or oxidative stress. So what causes oxidative stress, right? What's happening at the cellular level? Natural processes like digesting food. You're doing this every day, every time you eat. Also, when you're producing ATP molecules from your mitochondria to fuel your body, when your liver does detox, all of these normal physiologic processes actually bounce off a bunch of free radicals, dangerous molecules that can be damaging to the cellular environment. Also, man-made toxins like plastics, VOCs, phthalates, like things that are in our, personal care products, building products, in the air, the water, the soil, that we come in contact with. All of these things are unnatural. They're not supposed to be in our body, and they can damage different systems. So how can you reduce oxidative stress? Don't overeat. When you eat too much, too many calories, You now ate more than you needed, and now you have to deal with that load of food that came through. And so you're going to produce more free radicals than necessary, and you're going to have to spend your antioxidants to neutralize them. So not overeating is a strategy, and this is where fasting, again, can be helpful. Don't smoke. Smoking, tobacco, and all the things that are found in cigarettes, they're man-made toxins, right? So you want to avoid that. Alcohol, this I think is a little controversial. There are some studies that show that mild to moderate drinking can be protective in certain health conditions. I think if you're really worried about your brain health, I wouldn't use alcohol as the thing that I'm going to use to protect my brain. I would limit alcohol. I would consider it a toxin. So also like wine. Yes, I know there's resveratrol in it, but if those grapes were sprayed with pesticides, are you getting a dose of pesticides and herbicides with your wine? Unless it's organic, right? And then minimizing your toxic exposures. We care a lot about this at Truemedicine and my clinical practice, because this is the big elephant in the room that people are just now starting to become cognizant of. So buying more organic food when possible, using non-toxic products in the home, using air and water filters. These are all very high-yielding things that'll offload your body, offload your liver from all of these toxins that can enter the body. So let's put less bad stuff in, right? So that we don't have to create all this extra work for our antioxidant systems. Okay, now let's adopt an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. Let's dial down inflammation. So let's start with diet. I generally talk to everybody about a whole foods, plant-based diet. Whole foods means real food. It's not in a package. It hasn't been altered. It's the thing at the farmer's market that you purchase. And plant-based means mostly plants. At least 80% of what's on the surface area of your plate is plants. And and you can have animal products if you choose to, but I want you to have the right ratio. So this may be something to work up to. Now, there are many diets that have been shown to be brain healthy, like the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, which actually stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. There's also the MIND diet, which is for brain health, and it combines components of the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. You could look these things up and figure out, what are the foods and how you can start eating that way. Also, ketogenic diets. These are low carb, moderate protein, high good fat diets that get your body to flip from using carbohydrates for energy to using fat for energy. And it's such an efficient way of fueling the body when you break down fat for energy, that the brain is well fueled and cognition improves, just overall brain health improves. So what these diets have in common, I don't care which one you choose the one that you feel attracted to, that sounds fun to you. And you may want to mix and match and experiment with different ones and then do your own version of it. But what I want you to always keep in mind is that you're eating real food that's mostly plants. You don't have to become a vegetarian. So these diets are all low in meat, low in the bad fats, saturated and trans fats, and they're low in simple carbs and sugar. Lots of fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, even whole grains, some of these diets. Color is really important. So phytonutrient molecules like curcumin, sulforaphane, resveratrol, they actually can turn on your stress response genes, causing that hormetic stress for a short period of time, and then you kick into the anti-inflammatory effects. So how do you get these molecules? Rather than going with food lists that contain these, just go for color. Eat all the colors of the rainbow every day in small amounts. You don't have to do huge amounts. If there's one color that's hard for you, the next time you're at the store, think about that. So if anybody wants to write down the color that might be hard, put that in the chat. I wonder what you all come up with. Also, omega-3 fats are really important. Hard to get from diet, but easier from fish and seafood. And omega-3 fat is anti-inflammatory. It causes the release of many molecules like resolvins that resolve inflammation. Ideally, you're getting it from food. So if you're doing seafood twice a week, that's fantastic. You want to choose seafood that's not endangered and it's low in mercury. So fish like salmon, herring, mackerel, sardines are all really great sources. You may want to take a high quality omega-3 supplement on the days that you're not doing fish and seafood to make sure that you're getting a constant supply of omega-3, because omega-3 fats make up our cell membranes in the brain. And so you want healthy cell membranes that are able to communicate. So don't forget about omega-3s. All right, moving on. Other anti-inflammatory things. Exercise, there's no doubt that exercise is actually maybe our most potent anti-inflammatory tool. And when you mix different lifestyle habits, there's synergy. So this study showed combining a low-carb diet with exercise led to greater neuroprotection and cognitive improvement with just diet alone. Right? So I want you to mix and match. You don't have to do things that are very difficult. You just have to improve your diet and exercise, or exercise more, and these things will start synergizing together. Stress management. So in a meta-analysis where they pulled the results from many different studies, what they learned was stress experienced throughout the lifespan, especially if it happened in early childhood and it's been chronic, increases the risk of dementia. And I think if there's one lifestyle habit, if I could only have you do one, it would be the stress piece. I think it's just the biggest contributor to autoimmunity, chronic disease, cognitive decline. And if this is something that you haven't quite addressed, there are many resources out there to help you start doing that. I'm going to start doing weekly calls with everybody where we can just talk about whatever topics are top of mind. So we can talk about this and how to start working towards building resilience towards stress. And then sleep. Sleep is cooling anti-inflammatory medicine. I have become obsessed with sleep and darkness and all the physiology that comes alive at nighttime. And when we sleep, our brain detoxes more efficiently. So if you want to have a healthy brain, let's get the gunk out. And we don't have medications or supplements to do that. You've just got to sleep and be asleep long enough so that work can happen. There's a lot of data coming out that, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease may partly be due to toxins getting into the brain and then the brain creating an inflammatory response, because that's what you would want it to do. There's a foreign thing in the brain, right? And because of that ongoing chronic inflammation, you have brain loss, right? Well, the upstream approach is to get the gunk out. So sleep is probably one of the best ways you could do that. If you have sleep apnea, or if you're not sure you might have sleep apnea, make sure you take care of it, because oxygen is important. People with sleep apnea who obstruct, who can't get air to flow in and out, they're not oxygenating. Their oxygen saturation actually falls. And anytime your saturation is below 94%, that's actually a big deal. There's a steep decline in oxygen in the tissues under 94%. Okay. It's not like, oh, well, 93, 92, they're pretty close to 94. It's okay. It is not okay. When I was an anesthesiologist, I would get very alarmed if I saw an oxygen saturation of 93%. Talk to your doctor. There are home tests. There are tests you could do in the sleep clinic. And if you have sleep apnea, I know these devices are so hard to use, but we just have to make friends with them and figure out how to oxygenate at night. If you can't oxygenate, your mitochondria can't work, and all of your systems will start dysfunctioning, including your brain and your immune system. Okay, neuroprotection. How can we protect our brain? Well, we talked about exercise. I'm not going to keep going into it, but exercise does increase the size of the hippocampus, which is where memory functions happen, and the prefrontal cortex. This is an area that tends to decline with age. There's also evidence for remyelination in rats. So I'm curious about whether I can remyelinate with exercise. We don't have human studies that show us this, but I'm not going to wait for those studies to come out before I start exercising. So there's just so many benefits. Please make sure this is part of your life. And as I already said, brain-derived neurotrophic factor is just pouring out when you exercise, and you're just building more neurons and connecting them. Let's talk a little bit about those ketogenic diets that have been shown to be neuroprotective. In human studies in people with MS, they've been shown to improve quality of life, fatigue, depression. This is a lot of the work of Dr. Terry Walls. In mouse models, memory, learning, motor function improves. When they do experiments on these mice and give them lesions like MS, lesion sizes are smaller in mice with on ketogenic diets, and there's just less neuroinflammation. So this is a tool that can reach up into the brain and lower inflammation. Ketogenics are not for people who are just dabbling in nutrition. They're more advanced. It's something you would want to do gradually, maybe work with a nutritionist. We can certainly talk about them during our weekly calls, but it's something to work towards and to experiment with to see how it feels. Okay, here's another neuroprotective tool. I want to talk about what happens as women get into midlife and that estrogen drops. This comes from the work of Dr. Rhonda Voskul in UCLA. And look at this. Let me explain to you what's happening on this page. So red is estrogen, blue is testosterone, right? And here's the age across the lifespan. So during puberty, you get a rise in testosterone and estrogen. And you can see how this testosterone goes up and stays up. And for men, it's around age 30 when it starts to decline, okay? For women, we keep up our estrogen much longer. And as at around age 50, average age is 51, there's a steep decline in estrogen. And this is why a lot of women will experience brain fog, fatigue, they don't feel like themselves, mood changes, past traumas may resurface. And this is a time where a lot of neurodegeneration can happen. Disability can start progressing. Remember, I said early on, as we age with MS, we can go from sort of a relapse dominant picture to a more degenerative picture. And so for women, this happens when there's a steep decline in estrogen. For men, it's much more gradual, but this may explain why men tend to experience sort of a heavier burden of MS symptoms earlier on. So what do we do about this? So we know sex hormones are neuroprotective. There is data that for the right patient who is a candidate for hormone replacement therapy, it can be started early in menopause, not when you're 5-10 years past menopause, but pretty early on. The earlier you do it, the more brain you'll preserve. And there's some data that it may actually promote remyelination. So estrogen replacement can promote what's happening to your myelin. So this study used estriol. There's more than one kind of estrogen. There's estrone, estradiol, estriol, and this is estriol. What they saw was a reduction in relapse rates, cognitive function improved, and at 12 months, there was less atrophy in the group that used estriol. Okay. Estradiol or Premarin is a problem because of the receptors it binds in breast and uterine tissue. You can't push the dose up. And so estriol has turned out to be a better alternative. You can talk to your neurologist about this, talk to your primary doctors, gynecologists, and see if you're a candidate for this. Now, I wouldn't forget our male friends here. As I said, I think it is important to check your testosterone system. Oftentimes, if I have a young man with an autoimmune disease, I will check his total testosterone. If it's under 300, I will get curious and check some other markers like free testosterone, SHBG, which is sex hormone binding globulin, DHEA, because I want to understand what's happening in the testosterone system and if this person would benefit from replacement. Right. So again, this would require someone who understands hormones for them to do this workup for you. But I think it's important. It's another upstream tool to help us figure out how can we protect the brain better. All right. Tending to mind and body. So here are some things I want you to think about. Hopefully you have your pen and paper out and you're going to take some notes. Look at these two people. Look at how happy he looks. When you look that happy, there's stuff happening at the cellular level. There's dopamine flowing. There's prolactin flowing. There's your, cortisol's coming down. He probably feels quite connected to this woman next to him, right? And they're learning something new. So I want you to challenge your brain in new ways. And patients will always say, like, I do puzzles. Great. Now I want you to do something different, right? Learn a new language, do something artistic, like learn music or art or dance, find a new hobby, take a class, go to your local community college and learn that thing that you've kind of always thought about in the back of your mind. Volunteer, do brain games. I mean, there's so many ways for you to re-challenge your brain. When you challenge your brain, you're forming new connections. And when you stop using certain functions, like you stop doing math, you prune away those areas, right? Until you start doing math again, then you'll build them up again. Your brain is dynamic. I thought this was kind of a fun study I wanted to show you. Is your personality bad for your brain health? This study actually showed that people who were neurotic and who were prone to anxiety and stress actually had higher levels of these markers that can be inflammatory markers of central nervous system damage. Okay. And people who were conscientious and were able to engage in positive emotions actually had lower markers. So think about this. Where does your mindset hang around most of the time, right? Can we do something with our personalities and the thoughts happening up in our heads to help our brain health out? And then I want to just bring up a couple of other things. How resilient are you towards stress? Is this an area that we can work together to build more resilience? Are you suffering from nature deficit disorder? Right? We are all so disconnected from nature, and our physiology is starving for connection to the pheromones from trees and being under the sun and then the natural elements. So I'm reading this great book called The Nature Fix. Florence, I can never remember her last name, but anyways, it's a book that explores the impact of nature on our health. And if they had to quantify how much time you should spend out in nature, it's 5.5 hours a month where you go and hang out with trees or natural landscapes. Are you socially connected? Just being connected to others boosts our immune health, our nervous system health. Do you regularly do the things that bring you joy? Maybe this is music or dance or hanging out with the grandkids, whatever it might be. Maybe you watch a comedy routine or a fun movie. Do you make self-care a priority, right? Or do you feel guilty when you lay down for a nap in the afternoon? I want you to explore these things because these are the things that are going to have long-term benefit for you, for your brain health. And do you feel a sense of purpose in life, right? If not, we can definitely brainstorm these things together in our weekly sessions. It's a lot of fun to have these conversations together. Okay, here's my virtual pet, my favorite dog. How do you do all of this? I just went and said so many words, and you're probably thinking, okay, I'm never going to do all of this. Well, it's hard to do all of this alone. When we're together as a group and a community, we actually help each other and we make progress faster. And the faster and the sooner we do this, the more brain we'll protect. So keep showing up and let's learn together.